Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about an independent film called In Darkness. I unfortunately didn't get around to seeing this movie in my area. I live in the Madison area, and as far as I know, this film never played in like any Madison theaters or anything. Um, and so I basically heard about this movie a while ago. It kind of intrigued me a little bit. 3 stars who I've seen in movies that I really enjoyed, like Natalie Dormer is the star of the movie. She was in the last 2 Hunger Game movies. Ed Skrein, who was in the first Deadpool movie, is one of the villains, has a role in this movie. And Emily Ratajkowski from Gone Girl had a role in this movie as well. So there was kind of 3 stars who were in it. The plot kind of intrigued me, which I am going to go over here in a minute of what it's about. So there was a lot of reasons why I kind of wanted to see this movie. So here's the cover right here, In Darkness. At least on the DVD cover, that's what the cover is going to look like for you if you decide to track this movie down. So in this movie, guys, In Darkness, it's about a blind woman who basically helps out with musical scores with the orchestra for movies. She basically is basically the pianist for those. She helps them come up with visual cues, performs them and stuff. But the big thing is that she's blind. So she's a blind woman. She has to basically live her life like this. But she, like I said, she's very good at like music and stuff like that. So she helps people come up with really intriguing musical scores and stuff like that for movies. So one night she's at her apartment and she feels like she has heard a murder happen upstairs in the apartment above her. Um, Calls the police, tells them everything she knows, and so basically now she's a witness of a murder because that is really what happened. And she, in a way, she kind of knows the person who got murdered too. They kind of see each other in passing, or at least in her case, hear each other in passing. She can kind of smell her perfume because that's how she can know that it's her and stuff like that. So basically, throughout the course of this movie, the guy who did commit this murder, and like I said, this really isn't a spoiler because you really do see this person a lot in the movie, and it is revealed right away who it is. That's really not what In Darkness is about. It's not so much about the mystery, it's about kind of how things play out after this really horrible thing happened. That's really what In Darkness is about. So, like I said, no spoilers here. Everything I mentioned here really isn't spoiler territory. It's just things that happened in the movie that's not really spoilers that happened in the movie, I guess. So, anyway, like I said, so this murder basically happens, and the guy who was responsible for it knows the person who basically saw this murder take place, this blind woman. So throughout the course of this movie, he basically follows this girl around. If she's meeting anybody outside, if she is meeting with police, if she's meeting with detectives, he's trying to make sure that not too much information gets out in case she kind of rats this guy out, even though she probably doesn't really know who this guy is. It sounds like more so he knew more about her than she knew about him, kind of a deal. So throughout the course of this movie, this guy is trying to make sure that she's not revealing too much. And also, at one point in time, the two people meet each other, and so it's one of those things where the guy kind of has to figure out, since this girl knows so much about this murder, she was kind of one of the few people at this apartment that kind of knows about it, or at least kind of visually or audio wise kind of heard the murder take place. He's trying to make sure that not too much get out so that way he doesn't go to prison or anything like that. And throughout the course of this movie, this girl basically, when she does find out, it's kind of her choice of does she reveal it to the police? What exactly is her chemistry and relationship with this guy after they meet and stuff like that? And that's something that happens over the course of the film In Darkness. So overall, guys, I was pretty disappointed with this movie. I was so intrigued by the plot. I was intrigued by the idea of a blind woman hearing about a murder, pretty sure that she knows where it was and stuff like that. So basically, all that stuff I was intrigued by at first. And as I was watching In Darkness, the more was happening, the more that got revealed and so forth. I just got more and more disappointed as the film progressed. It had so much potential, and it just kind of lost this potential as the film progressed and kind of became a film that I kind of didn't sign up for at the beginning. So um, let's go over some positives and negatives of In Darkness as to why I was kind of intrigued by it, but at the same time pretty disappointed in it as well. So for my positives and negatives of In Darkness, I did think the use of sound was pretty clever. They really do make the point that this blind woman really can't see anything. It really is a matter of what she hears, what she smells, basically using all her senses. So the film does take advantage of this, and like I said, the use of sound is pretty clever. Whenever like she walked across the street and didn't realize a car was coming her way and stuff like that, the use of sound is very good. The use of sound is good also when she's like just preparing stuff in a kitchen and stuff like that. So I do like the use of sound in this movie. I thought it was very well handled for something like this. I also thought the performances overall were pretty decent. Natalie Dormer did a good job as the blind woman. There's a couple of scenes where you're not too in, you're not gonna buy it too much into the fact that she's blind. There is certain scenes like, okay, well, how did she figure that out and stuff like that. But for the most part, she does really feel like this blind woman that really does feel like she's at a disadvantage for witnessing this murder and stuff like that. Ed Skrein, who's kind of the villain slash guy, making sure that this girl doesn't reveal too much to the police kind of person. I thought he was pretty good in this movie. It felt like for him, I felt like several other actors could have given just the same performance, if not a better performance than this. So, but I thought his performance in Deadpool was good enough where he could have really brought something to the table for this movie. Like I said, it just feels like any other person could have played that role, really. But for what he was given, I thought that he was fine for what he had to do. Emily Ratajkowski, one thing I'll say about her is this is the first movie I saw her in when she's using an accent. And that kind of threw me off at first because in movies like Gone Girl and We Are Your Friends, she didn't do that. But like I said, for having an accent, for given the role that she's given, like you really kind of have to see the movie to kind of know what her role is in this movie. For what she was given, I thought she was very good at what she did. And like I said, the accent you kind of buy into after a while, even though it does kind of throw you off at first, just because there really isn't any other film where she's done that before. But overall, pretty decent performances overall. I thought some of the visual cues were occasionally interesting. There's scenes where Natalie Dormer's trying to teach people what it's like to be blind, so she puts like a blindfold over them and stuff like that. Some of the stuff they do for the visuals we thought was kind of interesting for that. Some of the things like pain she's suffering or things that's bothering her about the murder, some of that stuff I thought had some pretty neat visual cues to them. So I thought some of that aspect of the film was handled pretty interesting, I thought. But for my negatives of In Darkness and why I thought it was a disappointing experience overall, first and foremost, this really isn't much of a mystery. I really didn't feel like I was watching much of a mystery and suspense murder kind of story for the simple reason that I felt like the killer was revealed to me too early. And like I said, most of it's really about this killer kind of trying to figure out what this girl's told the police and family and friends and stuff like that. So there's really not much of a mystery here. It's more about kind of how this guy's going to go about knowing that this girl knows about all this stuff kind of a thing. So I thought on that aspect this film was really disappointing because it could have been a neat murder mystery, but instead it was just kind of this guy trying to figure out what this girl told the authorities and stuff like that. So not much of a mystery and suspense told here in this movie. I also feel like at one point in time the film has two stories going at once, and it really is kind of distracting. There's one subplot regarding kind of where this girl came from and why she might be blind, and it really is kind of distracting to the whole thing about this guy. Like I said, once again, trying to figure out what this girl told the authorities and stuff like that. So the whole two stories going at once thing I thought felt really distracting in this movie. And they really could have benefited from just one story being told in this, I thought. And also, this film's pretty boring. There's just a lot of scenes in this movie that really feel like they're not being told in the most interesting way possible. And I feel like it's every filmmaker's job to make things as visually and as just as interesting as you can. And there's just so many scenes in this movie that don't feel like they're the best visually told scene, that don't feel like they're just the best story scene overall, and that, like I said, some of the performances felt like anybody kind of could have done it kind of a thing. So there's just so many moments in this movie that feel like they just could have benefited from either a better director or a better script, and that was kind of disappointing on that level, I thought. There's also some pretty repetitive and useless material in this movie. There's a lot of material regarding kind of this woman kind of looking back in her past and seeing what it was like being blind growing up and stuff like that. And there's also a lot of material just kind of her dealing with this fact that this murder took place and that she kind of knew the person that got murdered and stuff. And like I said, some of it does feel really repetitive. There's even some shots that are basically happening again and again and again and again and again. And there's just so much material that you're exposed to that really is pretty useless for the story being told. I thought so. I thought that aspect of the film was really disappointing. There's also not much of a point being made in this movie. By the time the film's over with, I kind of couldn't come to a conclusion with what the film was really trying to say. I didn't know if it was trying to say something about blind people or how witnesses of a murder should go about things, or there's just so many things that the film kind of left me with questions on, and they're not good kind of questions. They're more like, okay, this film really didn't do a good job with making me feel a certain way and stuff like that. So I thought on that aspect, the film really didn't do a job too well on that regard. And then for my last negative point, I thought this film was just an overall missed opportunity. This could have been another great murder mystery kind of story, and it just kind of becomes something else and makes it more about this guy just making sure this girl doesn't say too much to the authorities and stuff like that. So overall, I'm going to give In Darkness a 5.5 out of 10. I was really pretty disappointed with this one. Like I said, the use of sound was pretty good. Some of the performances are pretty decent, even though I felt like any other actor or actress could have played most of these roles just as well, if not better. Some of the visual cues were kind of interesting on occasion, but almost everything else in this film was pretty bad for the most part. So 5.5 out of 10 for me. I'm not going to recommend In Darkness to anybody. So if you're at your local Redbox at some point soon, you could probably just skip this one and avoid this one. I can kind of see why I didn't get much of a theater release. It really isn't that great of a film, to be honest.